Alabama lands one of the biggest commits in the portal, Clifford Omoruyi. Arkansas grabs two top 10 players out of the portal this week, and Mark Pope has a clear vision he's executing for Kentucky's offense next season.
We're going to recap that, the portal closing, and more today on the Hoops Southbound Show.
Welcome to the show. The portal is now closed. So what does that mean for those of you who may not know the rules for the NCAA and whatnot? Well, it means simply that there will be no more additions to the available players coming into the transfer portal. So three things on that. Number one, the new rule this season, grad transfers can't just enter the portal whenever they want after the portal closing date. So who's in there now is who is in there now, unless a player is going to enter in later and wants to sit out a season. The second thing is there may be a few more names. I think most of them are starting to be flushed out, but there may be a few more names that come in because of the way this works. A player only has to contact their administration or someone on the coaching staff or etc. to say, hey, I'm entering the transfer portal, and the paperwork can take a minute. But as long as you got that contact in before the closure date, they can still enter the portal without any kind of penalty. You may have already noticed some of this going on social media. And then number three, players have all the time in the world to pick a new team, so long as they do it in time for them to get enrolled before the new school year. So that's the three things you need to know when it comes to the transfer portal closing. That's the down and dirty Barney style version, if you will, of what this means.
Well, speaking of the transfer portal, let's do a recap of where we stand so far. Here's a list of the top 10 players who have committed to SEC teams so far. Looking at number one, Johnell Davis. Shooting guard went to Arkansas. Jonas Aidoo. Clifford Omoruyi, who is now at Alabama. Brandon Garrison and Tremont Mark. We got Amari Williams, Mark Mitchell, Sean Padula, Jordan Pope, and Koby Brea.
Yep, and Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas have all done an amazing job getting to, top talent in the portal and bringing in multiple guys there who are making our top 10 in the SEC. Really strong list so far. And if you look at the overall classes, right now Arkansas sitting with the number one class, Kentucky sitting with number two. They're doing it more by volume. Arkansas got two huge grabs, both guys being in the top 10. We're going to talk about them both here in a little bit. And that other team we just mentioned, Texas, is number 5. Ole Miss is doing really well. Mizzou is doing really well. And then Alabama, I think their rating might adjust here in the next 24 hours with the addition of Clifford Omoruyi. I don't think it's reflected yet. So they might also move up into the top 5. We'll see. But they're sitting at 6 right now. And the teams that are above them all have really good teams. And then, of course, Vanderbilt also made the top 10 off of, I'm just going to call that pure volume on the amount that they're bringing in with their transfer class. So there's plenty of big names still available also in the portal. So let's take a look at the top 10 players who are still available right now in the transfer portal. We'll break some of these guys down. Norchad Amir out of Miami is sitting at number 1 right now. Jameer Watkins out of Florida State entered the transfer portal this week. He entered in at number 2, best available. Chaz Laner, we'll talk about in a little bit. Great Osabor. Coleman Hawkins out of Illinois. Devion Smith. Kadari Richmond, Jalen Wells, JT Toppin, and Akor out of Samford. You might remember that name as a popular pick with Samford upsetting Kansas in March Madness. Didn't come to fruition on a bad call there in March Madness, but that is your current top 10 best available.
Yeah, and David, plenty of those names have rumors that are linked to SEC teams. Let's start with Chaz Lanier. He's got some ties to Kentucky, Tennessee, and also Maryland.
Yeah, a really talented guard and one of the best available point guards in this class right now. He makes a ton of sense to any of these teams listed here. Kentucky is just a point guard away from absolutely locking up their backcourt and what looks to be a potential starting lineup. They've got some really good guard pieces already, and really having a true point might be the only thing they're missing. And then Tennessee, for sure, could add some help in their backcourt. Right now, Zakai's in there, and you've got to replace Santiago Vescovi in there for some depth as well. You need some guys in that backcourt because a lot of these guys graduated, and then you also had your front court transfer out, so you got some roster spots available to kind of rebuild your backcourt for Tennessee. Tennessee's done a lot of good work in their front court. I would like them to see some more work done in their backcourt as well. I heard a lot on Tennessee on Laner, but lately I've heard a lot more rumbling about Kentucky. I still lean Tennessee for him, but do not dismiss Kentucky in this. Maryland has kind of gone radio silent for the last time I checked, from the last time I checked, but that's all with rumors. So take that as you will. A lot of these teams, all three of them can be very much in the mix. It may be equal on all fronts. Who knows? But the last thing I heard, which was I checked in on this on Friday, Tennessee sounded like they were still the leader, but Kentucky was making a lot of noise. It sounded like. So we'll see where he shapes out in this. See if he goes to an SEC school.
Yeah, and like you said, David, these players have all the time in the world at this point, as long as they get enrolled before the school year. So it may be one of those situations where you see some of these players kind of wait around to see how the rest of the team develops, especially when you're looking at Kentucky, who have quite a few roster spots to fill. So, it may be one of these, we're kind of playing the long game here, so we'll see how it shakes out with the rest of the portal.
Yeah, and there was a couple other names that are outside the top 10 that I saw take visits prior to SEC schools, but still have not committed yet. So we're going to see when those names also start popping up in here. But Kentucky, I mean, we're going to talk about it here in a minute. Like what they're putting together, you can star in this offense at a point guard position. So it would make sense if Chaz Lanier is interested in Kentucky.
For sure. Someone else who may sound similar, but there's no relation. One of the last minute additions to the portal was JT Toppin. Like I said, no relation to the Kentucky set of Toppins, but Toppin comes from what is now a good New Mexico team from last season. He's from Dallas. We're seeing a lot of Texas schools starting to pop up on his leaderboard.
And it would make sense for Toppin to head to a school like Texas because they do need to improve their front court. He's a good rebounder. He's a quality defender. Lot to like in Toppin's game. Right now, I have two teams to watch for Toppin. For real, like the most hardcore are Texas and Texas Tech right now. Alabama's name's been thrown out there, but I don't think that's going to happen with the addition of Clifford Omoruyi. Similar, front court position, and then Alabama's out of roster spots now, from my understanding. So unless they drop somebody from their team that they currently have on their roster, Alabama's set. And so I don't know if JT Toppin would be considering Alabama. It sounds like he might be more than likely headed back to his home state. Like I said, I think Texas makes sense for Toppin going back in a team that needs another addition in their front court.
There's still a lot of time left for these players to decide, so we'll keep you guys updated as we continue to move through the portal, or the closing of the portal and the committing of players.
Commit time. It's commit time is what it is. Let's go team by team.
But let's run through all the teams. Like we mentioned, big get this week out of Rutgers with Clifford Omoruyi over to Alabama. Fantastic addition to this team, who's, for both of us, kind of big concern last season was defense, and a lot of that was stemming out of the front court. So getting a big man like this could be a fantastic start for Alabama in the offseason.
It certainly is their best ad, I would believe, so far. Evan Maya thinks Aiden Holloway's the best ad for Alabama. On 3 likes Clifford Omoruyi. Stats won't jump off the page, but he's a watch the film type of guy. One of the best big men in the transfer portal class, and Alabama certainly needed a big. They lacked a true dominant 5 last season. Nick Pringle was good, but this is an upgrade. Omoruyi has been a second team All Big Ten selection, 2-time All Big Ten honorable mention, and 2-time member of the first team All Big Ten defensive team. And just because we're talking about his defense so much, that does not mean that he does not have an offensive game. He can put up double digits in points, and he can pull down plenty of rebounds in the process. Alabama's got plenty of guys who can contribute quite a bit on that offensive end. The offensive ratings, almost all their roster is over 100 in their offensive rating. So you can expect another very good offensive team out of Alabama next season. I love this addition on the defensive front for the Tide. I think this works really well.
When you look at it too, Alabama's a high volume shooting team. So when you get a guy like that who's going to be able to help pull down offensive boards and get you more second chance opportunities as well, I think it's, like I said, great addition for Alabama, one of the best we've seen so far. But enough about Alabama. Let's move on to Arkansas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will throw this out there real quick before we move on to Arkansas. Talking to Christian last year, that was his principal concern is like avoiding bigs. Avoiding big guys was the biggest thing that he was talking about with the Tide and playing teams who had a dominant five. This is somebody who can take care of business for you.
We've been waiting for it, and Arkansas finally made some great additions out of the transfer portal. And they're big names. A name I thoroughly enjoyed covering last year. Two players out of the top 10, Jonas Aidoo out of Tennessee and Johnell Davis from FAU.
Since On3 and 24/7 started ranking transfers, John Calipari has never had a top 15 transfer. First season at Arkansas, he grabs two. Now, both Aidoo and Davis are going through the NBA process, but it sounds like that's not going to be the case. It doesn't sound like they're headed to the draft. They're also not mock draft anywhere. Both talented guys, but would likely benefit from going back to college for another year. So let's start with the first edition. Aidoo. Both Evan Mia and On3 have Aidoo as a top 10 player coming out of the portal and the number 2 center on On3. He was second team all SEC last season, and he has been a player who has gotten literally better every season, and you can see it in the stats. Now, some people have gotten a bad taste in their mouth because of Aidoo's second weekend performances in the NCAA tournament against Creighton and Purdue. But I would like to remind people about who's also in those front courts that Aidoo had faced. You know, guys like Zach Edey and Ryan Kalkbrenner are both projected to be NBA picks in this year's upcoming draft. I feel like this is a fit. I like the Aidoo to Arkansas fit quite a bit. I like Aidoo as a player, and I also like him as a player that Cal can work with. Cal's a guy who's worked with some great centers in the past, like DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, and Oscar Tshiebwe. I really feel like Cal can get Aidoo to a second-round draft pick for next season, and a legitimate undrafted free agent prospect. And I that's something I'm excited about. Maddie, do you have anything on Jonas?
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned one of the things was that I love covering him last year when we got to talk about Tennessee. I think Jonas Aidoo is one of those that can be an X factor in those games, especially when you're going up against some solid front courts. So fantastic get for the Hogs. I think it's something that they kind of desperately needed, and a huge piece of leadership. I think that'll be coming onto that floor with a
And
lot
he
of them.
had an excellent February in SEC play. And we kept talking about it. When Dalton Connect wasn't on, everybody wanted to talk about Dalton Connect, who didn't follow this conference hardcore. They kept wanting to talk about Dalton Connect. Jonas Aidoo could keep that offense churning when Dalton Connect was having an off night. And he was a big factor in that front court for Tennessee. And this was a great, he was a great player to keep the offense going when its wheels were sputtering. And that was a big problem with Tennessee back into the 2022-2023 season. So I like this addition a lot. So if the front court's struggling for Arkansas, Jonas Aidoo may be a guy that Arkansas turns to. But let's talk about that backcourt now. One of the biggest gets in the portal this year, Arkansas grabs Johnell Davis, likes to be referred to Nelly from my understanding, out of Florida Atlantic. Like Boogie Flan, he's a bit of a combo guard, although he is listed as a shooting guard on 3. 18.2 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, 2.9 assists per game last season. Davis also shoots 48.3 from the field and 41.4 from 3. Arkansas has some shooters. Look at this. Look, if you haven't got the message yet, Arkansas is going to be able to shoot the basketball with additions like Carter Knox, Boogie Flan, and Johnell Davis coming into next season, which is something that Arkansas has wanted for a while, is some guys who could shoot the basketball. And Davis is also extremely proficient from the corner, 50% from corner threes last season. All AAC, and scored his 1,000th point against Arizona this season for FAU. And then, of course, you also talk about like the March Madness experience as well. He got to a second round this year with Dusty May and the Owls, with the team that was put back together from a Final Four run back in the 2022-2023 season. So this is a great ad for the Razorbacks. Now, last week I told you that NIL would be a big time factor here. The reported number by Jeff Goodman is north of $1 million for him to come back to college. So it's extremely surprising based on what we know right now about Arkansas's basketball NIL situation. But wow, that's quite a number. But I said, whoever pulled the trigger, they're probably gonna get Johnell Davis. And Arkansas said, "Yep, we'll write that check."
That they did, because we were talking about last week how really all that Arkansas needed after the Jonas Aidoo ad was, somebody who could be a leader and who could, possibly run point if needed. But somebody that was gonna lead the backcourt. And, I guess Arkansas saw that too and decided to throw an extra 0 or 2 on that check.
Well, it was all freshmen and sophomores with guys like Big Z, who was the sophomore, and then you had the freshmen who were coming in. So you only had freshmen in your backcourt, and you had a sophomore who didn't get to play, a full season at Kentucky last year in your front court. So adding Jonas Aidoo, senior player, and a grad transfer out of Johnell Davis, that gives you a little bit more experience. Hopefully, you keep going down that path here in the portal. If you're the Razorbacks, I would like to see that more than anything else. And I think a 4 might be a really good addition, like a very strong defensive 4 with good rebounding ability. Someone like that should be who Arkansas is targeting next. And there's plenty of power forwards available right now in the transfer portal, high-end ones at that.
I was gonna say, maybe like another guy we like to talk about last season, and Aidoo.
Yeah, that definitely be a good ad if Arkansas went the Aidoo route. I'm hearing a lot of rumors on that. I don't know what the truth is. But I do know that he did make a visit to Arkansas. He put it on his Instagram, and he has paid his visits to Arkansas. There's some other teams in the mix. I've heard Pitt and a few others, but Maddie, you're kind of grinning at me. Did something just break here in the last few minutes?
No, no, not that I know of. I just, me, I was a big fan last year.
Oh yeah, no, and
He was
going
playing
back,
well. So,
yeah.
it would be another good get for Arkansas, add a little more leadership to that team. And I'm assuming give him what he thought he was missing at Kentucky is a little bit more playing time since that roster won't be as packed.
And I do want to talk about a couple of things on Fierro real fast. I know I've heard some Kentucky fans talking about, well, I don't think he'll go to Arkansas because Cal, he already left before Cal left Kentucky. Cal was, as we know, looking at jobs back in February. So maybe if Fierro was already thinking about this in direction, it wasn't necessarily a Cal situation. It was a more of, I don't know where Cal's going to be next season, so I need to start looking at my options. So that may be also something that's floating out there in the ether in the rumor mill. But again, this is crazy happy rumor time around everywhere, and that's what transfer portal season is in so many ways.
Yeah, before we get too deep into the conspiracy theories of what could or couldn't happen with the transfer portal, let's move on and we'll go to Georgia. They get an SEC to SEC transfer in Tyron Lawrence coming out of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, first big ad for Georgia this transfer cycle, it feels like. And it's a player that has been one of the best in this conference for a couple of years. Lawrence started 28 games last year and ended the year as Vanderbilt's second leading scorer at 13.8 points per game and their third leading rebounder at 5.1. He's a guard. So very good positional rebounder. He led the team in steals with 39 last season and ended the season shooting 39.9% from the field and 27.2% from three. Wasn't extremely electric, but let's face it, that was a very flawed Vanderbilt team last year. Lawrence had 7 games this season in which he had at least 20 points, including 3 straight against Arkansas, LSU, and Kentucky.
We talked about Tyron Lawrence a little bit last year. And I think
it was the thing that was going to be the glue for Vandy when we were talking about Vandy last year. Yeah, he had to be good for Vandy to do anything.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see what it's going to be like with, a team around him and a coach who seems like he's got a program going in the right direction instead of, kind of playing for your life every single game over at Vanderbilt. So I think it'll be an interesting ad for sure. Interested to see how that kind of changes the dynamic of that Georgia team.
And also a Georgia native as well. So coming back home for Tyron Lawrence.
Definitely. Another big team this week that we've talked quite a bit about. Have a week, Mark Pope. Let's go to Kentucky. They added not 1, not 2, nor 3, but 4 players out of the top 150 best transfers. Got Brandon Garrison, Andrew Carr, Koby Brea, and Kerr Kriisa.
I think it's Kriisa, yeah, out of West Virginia. Yeah, very good guard. Yeah, again, we'll learn the names
like
by
we
August.
said. Once we get to season, we'll have these names nailed down. But 3 of the 4 have played at the P6 level basketball. So I mean, Mark Pope is building a system
He
over at
absolutely is.
Nation.
He absolutely is. Kentucky is putting together a competitive basketball team for next year. Let's start with Brandon Garrison, and I'm going to go talk a little bit here on Kentucky, so everybody buckle up. So this is what we got. Let's start with Brandon Garrison. Very good player. He's very young and someone you can develop to have for future years to come. McDonald's All-American and FIBA Under-18 Americans Gold Medalist. He is incredibly efficient around the rim and someone that can be a very good interior player. He doesn't necessarily fit the Mark Pope model, but he's a guy that you take because you want to develop him long term. There's a lot to like here because he has a lot of upside and someone you can see growing during the course of Pope's tenure before making his way to the next level. Very good rebounder and someone who plays good defense. Now he has some work to do on offense. But I remind people he was also on a very bad team last year. So if you're hung up on the numbers, I do see plenty of upside here in the Brandon Garrison ad.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be much like the case we were talking about with Tyron Lawrence, who, has the opportunity to be a fantastic player that can flourish when he's developed in the right system and, with the right group around him.
Absolutely. And then you out of Wake Forest, you've got another great forward to the Kentucky team and somebody who fits the Mark Pope system very well. Carr is a dude who scored over 1,000 points in his career, has grabbed 500 rebounds, and blocked over 100 shots. But what I like here for Pope is that this is a 6'10 forward, and Carr shot 37% from three last season. This is modern basketball and exactly what the Mark Pope design is. Play like a video game, get out in transition and be effective and willing to pull up from three when it's there. And then Carr is very effective inside the arc as well. We're talking about someone who hits 5.7 at a 6.1 from inside. That's some of the most locked in 10 to 12 points you're ever going to see on a stat sheet. And the way Pope's offensive system is designed, it makes you choose between defending the two or defending the three. And this guy is one who's going to make defenses think. So he's going to be very, very difficult to deal with. And then let's go ahead and talk about these backcourt additions that came in this week as well. Koby Brea. Brea comes from a solid Dayton team, absolute sniper from deep, 49.8%, can shoot it with a hand in his face and is lethal when left open. Came off the bench a lot for Dayton last season and could be a sixth-man option for Kentucky if he's not a starter. He averaged 3-point field goals made per game last season, and his shooting has gotten better every single year. Best shooter in the portal, excellent get for Pope, exactly the player that he wants to get at the two. And did I mention you've also got Kerr Kriisa? Kentucky added its fourth player in the top 100 transfers, and it's another guy who can shoot extremely well from deep. You're talking about Kriisa, who was shot roughly 42% from three last season. He helps you out at the point guard position, and he can also be moved over to the shooting guard position. He's proven he's very effective from deep, and he gives some extra security to Kentucky's backcourt. The only thing that's going to drive you crazy is that sometimes he can be inconsistent. So improving his consistency is the biggest thing for this Mark Pope offense when adding Kerr to this team.
David, just kind of running through, I felt like the biggest highlight there in looking at these players Kentucky's bringing in is there quite a bit of shooters in there.
There are.
So look at that shooting for Kentucky. David, you talked about making champions and how great teams tend to shoot 36% from deep. And looking at Mark Pope's offense, one that loves to shoot the three. So, I mean, if you combine all the transfers Kentucky's put together from this transfer class, they shot 41.4% from deep last year. Andrew Carr, Butler, Brea, bringing a lot to the table in terms of that volume. And then you have Owe, who can make a contribution as well.
I don't think that's what they're going to shoot next season, but I can certainly see Kentucky being one of the best three-point shooting teams in the conference. And I want to explain exactly why I like what Mark Pope is putting together. So let's go ahead and go to the whiteboard here. Now, for those of you who are listening on Spotify, I will try to describe this to the best of my ability, and you can always jump over to the YouTube channel. Times are the exact same. So this is a typical set that BYU ran at 8 a lot last year, and almost every team in college basketball runs their own version of this concept. But this was common for BYU to run, and it emphasizes the three heavily. So to start the play, you got the 2 and the 3 in the corners. The 4 comes up to the top of the key. The 5 mirrors the 4's original position. Reason being, you can run this play to either side of the floor, but it works best out of the 4 position for shooting purposes. The 1 passes to the 4. This triggers the 3 to begin his motion along the sideline and curl to the 4. The 1 sets a zoom action screen, freeing the 3 up in motion to make that move to the 4. And the 1 then moves to the corner. Now, this initiates the different options in this offensive set. If it helps you, because you may be new to looking at offensive plays in basketball, at this point, kind of think of the 4 as the quarterback. So option 1, the 4 gives it to the 3 on a dribble handoff. The 3 takes the 3, or you can choose to drive to the basket. This is very, very typical. This is a very typical concept out of a zoom action, and you probably saw Purdue run this a lot during March Madness. But here's where things get a little bit different. BYU would often make one variant to create more shooting options. So option 2 is that the 4 rejects the dribble handoff, and the 3 continues that curl to the basket. And the 4 will pass that ball to the 3 on his way to the basket. Now, we'll call this next option, option 2A. Once the 3 gets the ball, he can shoot from the paint. The 5 also moves in for the offensive rebound. Or you can move to option 2B. The 3 gets the ball, turns down the layup, and kicks to one of the corners where we have the 1 and the 2 set up. And the 3 and the 5 are in position for the offensive rebound off of that 3. And then you have a bailout option. Say the defender cuts off the pass, the 4 doesn't pass and instead shoots the 3. Remember, in Mark Pope's concept, he wants 1 through 5 being able to shoot the 3 at will. So now you may ask, why would you want to pass on a layup if you can, get an easy 2 in that process? And why does this affect the Mark Pope transfers that he's bringing in? So take a look at this. If you add the players that he's put so far in the portal to this team and put these to these numbers. At the 1, you got Kriisa, 42.4% from 3. You got Brea, who shoots 49.8% from 3. 2 guys in the corners who shoot 40% plus from 3, and they take one of the most efficient 3-point shots in the game. Away, we have the 3 here, or who has at the 3 position, who shoots 52% from 2 last season. Anywhere you go, you have a 42 to 52% chance of scoring on a single play. Would you rather take a 3 that goes down at 40%, or would you rather take a 2 that goes down at 50%? The answer is you want a 3 at 40% because it becomes 1.2 points per shot and further spaces the floor. 1.2 easily greater than 1. Having that floor spaces increases your chance of hitting the 2 because the defense has to choose between the 2 or the 3, which one to guard. That increases your points per possession by increasing your 2-point average as well. BYU averaged 69.3 possessions a game. And if you can get those points per possession up to 1.25, that's 86.6 points per game. That would be the 3rd highest scoring offense as compared to last year's numbers in the SEC and what would be Pope's first season. And that's not including free throws or offensive rebounds. If you take option 1, Away is still a 37.7% 3-point shooter, which is higher than that 36% threshold. And if Carr is running your 4, you have a 37.1% 3-point shooter as a bailout option. On nearly every option, you have someone who can shoot 40% for an efficient amount of points. This is why BYU was the 14th most efficient offense in the country last season. And their best 3-point shooter on BYU was only 38.5%. You added 2 guys who shot better than that last season and are willing to shoot at volume. And you added 4 guys who shoot better than BYU's average from 3 last season. Unless these numbers regress under Pope, you can bank on Kentucky being one of the best offenses in the league next season.
And Kentucky's not going to be the only good offense. Between Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas, and Alabama, based on the teams that they're putting together, we're going to see the floor spaced out a lot more than we did a few years ago when nobody in this league could shoot. Teams are going to have to learn how to play quite a bit in transition and 3-point defense in this conference. or it's probably going to be a shootout every single night.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, if you would like the whiteboard concept that we just pulled up here on the graphics here on YouTube, please let us know, and we'll try to bring it back every now and then. I think it's kind of helpful to say it's a lot easier than me just trying to describe someone's offense, just in broad terms and show you like what's a very typical concept that they run. So if you like it, let us know.
Moving on to LSU, they have Bailey out of Richmond.
Brings a experience shooting to LSU, but seems very much like a depth piece on most teams. But LSU lost a lot of scoring, and Bailey gives you some of that back. So it's not a bad addition by LSU by any means.
Moving on, we've got RJ Melendez at the Georgia Bulldogs, moving to the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
Bulldog to Bulldog mood, a lot of length, a very balanced player. With the size, he can play a lot of different spots on the floor, too. I like this addition for Mississippi State and Chris Jans, especially as a depth option.
And we finally saw some life out of Norman this week. Oklahoma getting some activity in the portal. This week, the Sooners added Jaden Jones, Bryson Gooden, and Duke Miles from High Point.
Oklahoma and Auburn had a showdown for Miles in the portal, and boy, did Oklahoma need to win this one. Duke Miles going to Oklahoma. Miles consistently put up points for High Point last season. No pun intended there, I guess, with that name. Can easily get to double figures on any darn night. He's very efficient around the rim, 67%. Very smooth jumper, and he can absorb contact and get to the foul line. Things you like in any guard. Also shoots 36.1% from deep. That magic number should be an automatic starter for Oklahoma next season.
Yeah, all great gets for sure. Keeping it moving, let's go to South Carolina, who added Jamari Thomas this week out of Norfolk State.
I like the addition. South Carolina needed some more scoring ability for next season since Messi Johnson transferred out of Ohio State. Gives you a little bit back, someone who can put up some points there for the Gamecocks.
And another team that's kind of going to have to rebuild around some signature pieces, Tennessee gets back to rebuilding their front court and adding Igor Milicic Jr. out of Charlotte.
I think it's Milicic. I've been trying to say it. Again, I will have these names.
We'll learn it by August. It's fine.
Learn it by August. That is the saying right now. Vols pick up a versatile and really modern style basketball kind of guy, and Igor Milicic. Guy who can play the wing and can also play the four. Sounds like he might mainly play at the four from what we're hearing out of Tennessee, but he has the ability to run the floor, and he won't be a primary ball handler, but he can handle the ball. Additionally, he can be efficient from three, gives you plenty of floor spacing out of that front court. And then he's also an effective rebounder. At 6'10", he's a legit threat to go off for a double-double any darn night. Strong ad for Tennessee, who needs to replace some pieces in their front court. But I like what they're doing here, and I think this little bit of modern basketball concept adds more to the Tennessee offense for next season.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great ad, especially when you're losing some of those key pieces. So
Waka and Aidoo, yeah, those are tough losses out of your front court for sure.
For sure. Rick Barnes saw some work to do, but great get for sure. Moving on to Texas, they added Malik Presley to what is already a good backcourt in Texas that they've put together this season.
Yeah, developing prospect that Texas is getting out of Vandy. Texas is pretty much has a potential rotation of primary guards in their backcourt right now. Presley gives you depth and someone that you are going to hopefully develop along the way if you could retain him in the long term.
Down in College Station, A&M brings in Zerk Phelps from SMU. David, Texas A&M finally has a complete roster.
Zerk Phelps was SMU's points, steals, and free throws made leader. He led the team in BPR, OBPR, and was second in DBPR. This is a nice pickup by Buzz and the Aggies. Gives them Taylor, Carter, Phelps, and Obaseki in the backcourt. You were looking for a guy to replace Boots Radford and the transfer portal for next season, and you lost out on Jordan Pope to Texas earlier, but you get a solid player that can put up points. I think the only thing left to be desired is three-point shooting for the Aggies. Phelps shooting under 30% from three, but so did Boots Radford. But the good news is you brought in some more depth pieces that are complete and capable of shooting from three. I'm not saying this is going to be a team that shoots lights out by any means, and Texas A&M should be able to shoot a little bit better from deep next season. Maybe you can be a little bit better than third from last in the SEC next year in 3-point field goals made. But definitely, this is a good offensive piece to help replace Boots Radford.
Also this week, another Kentucky decommit has found a new home. Santos Cyril has committed to Georgia. The Bulldogs are picking up a high potential big man in the front court. Cyril committed to Georgia over returning to his original commit at Kentucky, going to Arkansas and Georgia Tech.
Yeah, Cyril is a very raw but promising prospect for Georgia. Someone that can really grow. How long he stays in college will be a question, but the potential is very, very high. Cyril has a lot of the physical tools you want out of a big man. He's also an elite level rim protector, can block a ton of shots. He rebounds well on both ends of the court. But the thing he really needs to develop is his offense. He's still very raw there. Reminds me a little bit of Bay Fall, who committed to Arkansas last year. Very high ceiling, but he has some growth that's going to be required. But at Georgia, I feel like he's going to see some more playing time as compared to what Bay Fall saw at Arkansas. So this is a slightly different situation. We ended up seeing, Bay Fall lose playing time to Chandler Lawson and Mekhi Mitchell, who were more experienced and a lot more developed. But overall, I like this ad for Georgia because this gives them a front court piece that can really help this team rebound the basketball. And we're continuing to look to see Georgia take another step forward next season. This was a team that was very efficient across the board and very equal to everybody. We want to see them take that next level of growth next season. And this is a very high potential prospect that if you can develop by January, February time conference play, if you developed and he's worked really hard, it could be a big contributor for this Georgia team.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a big kind of step in that development with Mike White. We saw several freshmen going last year. Main one that comes to the forefront of my mind is Blue Kane, who came in, and you could see the obvious growth from that first kind of preseason game into the end of the year. So I think it's going to be a very similar situation here, and I think it's going to be great for the Georgia Bulldogs moving forward.
Absolutely, and you're exactly right. Georgia had so many guys. You just mentioned Blue Kane, but you also talk about DeMurray. And then, they had so many young 4-stars and 5-stars, and you're also going to add Ace and Newell next year. This is the team that's building out of high school and then adding from the portal to supplement. So the talent on Georgia is very good. It's about developing that talent right now for Mike White to get a team in the NCAA tournament, something that Georgia's definitely been missing out on for a little bit.
For sure. Well, this week is the last week we are going to be kind of over covering the portal like we have been. About 70% of the players in the top 150 have already committed to teams. We'll still keep track and keep you updated every week, especially with big name commitments and kind of the change ups going forward with these rosters.
Yeah, so next week we're going to be starting our NBA draft coverage. You may be like me and be interested in the draft because it's kind of like this moment to watch the guys who have been on your team take that next step in their basketball playing career. So it's a really cool time. We cover, like we said on this channel, like everything from freshman to, from start to finish, so this is the end of a lot of guys' SEC and college careers, and they're taking that next step in the NBA draft. It's kind of an opportunity to celebrate them and really enjoy it as a fan, as a very big achievement for your fan base, which is why we keep an eye on the NBA draft. But yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on the transfer portal as well. You may have also noticed some of our content for the NBA draft has already started. Rob Dillingham, our scouting report video for his draft profile came out, and then Dalton Connect, the one that Maddie worked on, is coming out this week. So the NBA draft combine and more is also, those names also just got dropped. We just hit the early entry deadline. So guys, we're going to be talking NBA draft here over the next month. So please like and subscribe. Follow us anywhere that you get your podcast. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.